What's going on, guys? Hat format is known for having a lot of different splashable engines, so today I want to talk about splashable engines that I think are really great, and I want to talk about why these are the top 5 best splashable engines in hat format. I want to go over what all these cards do, ratios that you're probably going to see, and the most common ratios, and just a whole conversation about the good splashable engines in this format. So anyways, guys, let's get started. So the first splashable engine I want to talk about are the hands, which consists of Fire Hand and Ice Hand. Now, what these do is Fire Hand has the effect when it's destroyed in your possession by battle or card effect and sent to the graveyard, you're able to destroy a monster your opponent controls and special summon a Ice Hand from deck. And Ice Hand has sort of the opposite effect, where if it's destroyed by battle or card effect in your possession and sent to the graveyard, you're able to pop a spell or trap your opponent controls and summon a Fire Hand from deck. Now, this is probably one of the smallest engines that a lot of decks will play, because at maximum it's going to be 6 cards, 3 copies of Fire Hand and 3 copies of Ice Hand. Now, with that being said, a lot of decks will choose to play just 2 and 2, and a lot of decks will even choose to side hands in general, being 2 and 2. No one's really playing 3 and 3 in the side decks, but in general, for the main decks, like I said, 3 copies and 3 copies, or 2 and 2, but you will also find decks that will sometimes run 3 copies of one of them and 2 copies of the other, and it really comes down to how well your deck deals with what they deal with. So what I mean by that is, if your deck doesn't inherently play a lot of back row removal, some decks will choose to play 3 Ice Hand and 2 Fire Hand, because this will count as a back row removal card, and seeing an Ice Hand tends to be more important for you than seeing a Fire Hand. Or vice versa, if you have back row removal already in your deck, some decks will choose to play 3 Fire Hand if they have problems outing monsters. But really, it's just player preference. You never really see anyone playing 1 and 1. It's always going to be 3 and 3, 2 and 2, or some combination of those numbers. Now, these cards are great at breaking boards, and the benefit of these as well is they are level 4. So that means you can use them for Xyz plays, because rank 4s in hat format are extremely powerful. And not even just that, but being able to play enough of these that you see them in your hand, and it gives you the option, if you say don't open the best and you need to stall out for a couple turns, these help you break boards and float and survive for a few turns. Now, the one thing to note with these are these can miss timing, and also for their effects to resolve, you need to be able to actually destroy the card. So if your opponent, say, attacks over an Ice Hand and has no back row, and you're not able to destroy a back row, you won't be able to float it. And similar with Fire Hand, if they have a monster that, say, can't be destroyed by card effects, if they attack over the Fire Hand and if the monster they target with the Fire Hand isn't destroyed, you won't be able to summon the Ice Hand. But in general, this is one of the smallest engines and one of the best engines in terms of board breakers, so that is why it's here. The next splashable engine I want to discuss is the traptrix. In the main deck, it usually consists of some combination of traptrix Mermail, traptrix Dionea, bottomless trap hole, and traptrix trap hole Nightmare. Now, what these do is Mermail is your main searcher. What it does is, on normal summon, allows you to add a whole normal trap card from your deck to your hand, and on special summon allows you to destroy a spell or trap card that your opponent controls. Traptrix Dionea has the effect on normal summon to target a traptrix monster in your graveyard and special summon it, and then on special summon allows you to target a trap hole normal trap in your graveyard, reset it, but if it's still on the field during the end phase of your next turn, it gets banished. Now, one other thing to keep in mind with these that I've played so many games in person and online and people forget is both of these are unaffected by normal trap hole cards. So for example, if you summon Traptrix Mermail and your opponent has something like a bottomless trap hole and they activate it, this is unaffected, so the monster won't be banished. Now, in terms of ratios, most of the time people can go as low as playing just 1, 2, 3 copies of Mermail, but usually in terms of this package, people will play anywhere from 2 to 3 Mermail and 1 to 2 Dionea. It really just depends on the deck, and what's nice about these is obviously it's ways to search trap hole cards. So bottomless is at 1 and is considered one of the main 4 staples of the format, so being able to search that is really good. And if you're playing this package, obviously you want to have more than one search target in case you open it, and that is why Traptrix Trap Hole Nightmare is here as an additional search target that has a negation effect. It's when your opponent activates a monster effect of a monster that was special summoned that turn, you negate that effect and destroy that card. So that is extremely powerful. And what's nice about these is it allows you to make rank 4s. So, for example, if a Mermail's in graveyard, you can summon the Dionea, summon the Mermail back. Mermail will pop a back row, so it also counts as back row removal, and then you can make a rank 4, which is really nice. And this also works very good into sideboarding. So what I mean by that is there are more trap hole normal traps that a lot of decks will side for specific matchups. So for example, people will side Deep Dark Trap Hole, which gets rid of level 5 or higher effect monsters. It banishes them. Void Trap Hole, that gets rid of monsters that are special summoned with 2,000 or more attack. And Acid Trap Hole, which gets rid of set monsters with 2,000 or less defense. So just very versatile engine. It's just a very solid engine to be able to gain advantage basically out of nowhere and always keep some sort of board presence, whether that's stopping your opponent with the traps and keeping monsters on board, or just out of nowhere being able to make rank 4s. The next engine is obviously the artifacts, which consists of usually some combination of artifact Madolche, artifact Beagletech, artifact Scythe, artifact Ignition, and artifact Sanctum. Now, the artifacts are based on monsters that are able to be set in your spell and trap card zone, and then they gain effects when destroyed on the opponent's turn. So, for example, Madolche, when it's destroyed on your opponent's turn while it's set, you're able to special summon it, and when it's special summoned, you can non-targeting pop a face-up card your opponent controls. Beagletech has the effect when it's destroyed while set in the opponent's turn. You're able to special summon it and mandatory destroy up to 2 spell and trap cards, minimum 1, that you control, which can then trigger other artifacts, for example. And artifact Scythe, that has the effect when it's destroyed in the spell and trap card zone on the opponent's turn, you're able to special summon it, and when it's special summoned on the opponent's turn, for the rest of the turn, your opponent cannot access their extra deck, which is extremely powerful. After that, we have Ignition, which pops a back row and sets an artifact from deck to your spell and trap card zone, and then when it's destroyed by a card effect, you will be able to skip your opponent's next battle phase. Lastly, we have Artifact Sanctum, and this special summons a artifact monster from your deck, but if you do that, you can't conduct your battle phase for that turn, and you're only able to activate it once per turn. And then if it's destroyed by a card effect, by an opponent's card effect, you can target a card on the field and destroy it. Now, this engine specifically can come in all different shapes and forms. For example, I've seen people play as small of an engine as 2 Madolche and 3 Sanctum, but it can also be as large as playing 3 Madolche, 2 Beagletech, Scythe, 3 Ignition, and 3 Sanctum, which to me I think is a little overkill unless you're playing a deck that's mostly artifacts, which isn't the most common. Now, this package is really good because it punishes the opponent for trying to blow up your board. For example, with things like H.A.T, Diamond Direwolf, even things like MST. But the one downside to it is that these will only be able to summon and get their effects if they're destroyed on the opponent's turn. So sometimes opponents will hold their back row removal until it's your turn. So that can be a bit of a downside, but what's nice about these is they are level 5, so that allows you to access very powerful rank 5 monsters such as Pleiades, Volcasaurus, Zenmaio, and just so many other rank 5 Xyz. So that is extremely good. And there's other cards that tend to get paired with these. For example, Double Cyclone being a card that will allow you to pop one of your back row and pop one of the opponent's. So even if you hard draw these and don't see an ignition, you're able to pop one of your artifacts and an opponent's card and still get the summon, and you removed a potential threat back row. And another card is Call of the Haunted. This is extremely good because the artifacts get their effects when special summoned during the opponent's turn. They don't have to specifically be popped and then summoned with their own effect to get their effect off. So Call of the Haunted's really good, and speaking of those rank 5s, if you are able to make a rank 5 with one of the monsters summoned back off of this and make something like a Pleiades, you're able to bounce the Call of the Haunted and reuse it, which is really nice, so it turns into multiple forms of disruption. So that is extremely powerful. There's so many different decks that do synergize with it, whether it's because they can make rank 5s, for example, things like Constellar can make rank 5s easy, so it's really nice, or there's a ton of other just artifact decks in general that are good, or just as a standalone engine, being able to, pop cards whenever, stop your opponent from getting to their extra deck, pop back row, or just, summon and do a bunch of different plays and make big pushes. The fourth engine I want to talk about is the Fire Fist engine. This one consists of Fire Fist Bear, Fire Fist Gorilla, Coach Soldier Wolfbark, Fire Formation Tenki, and Fire Formation Tensu. Now, this engine is very unique and usually is used in decks that are just trying to get simple +1s or take advantage of Fire Formation Tenki. So first, let me go over these cards, and then we can talk a little more into that. The first card being Brotherhood of the Fire Fist Bear. This one, once per turn, when it inflicts battle damage to the opponent, you can set a Fire Formation spell from your deck, and then you can get rid of a Fire Formation spell or trap to pop a monster your opponent controls. Fire Fist Gorilla has a very similar effect to Bear, except when it destroys an opponent's monster by battle, you set a Fire Formation spell, and then you can get rid of a Fire Formation spell or trap to pop a spell or trap your opponent controls. Coach Soldier Wolfbark isn't a Fire Fist monster, obviously, but it is a Beast Warrior, and what it does is you can target a level 4 Fire Beast Warrior type monster in your graveyard, special summon it in defense position, and its effects are negated. So really, this is just a way to summon back your other Fire Fist and be able to make some powerful rank 4s. Fire Formation Tenki searches your Beast Warrior type monsters and gives all your Beast Warrior type monsters 100 attack. And Fire Formation Tensu is a double summon that also gives an attack boost of 100 while it's face up. So in terms of ratios, it can really vary. I'd say the most common is running 2 to 3 copies of Bear and the Wolfbark and 3 copies of Tenki. But slightly other builds will play somewhere between 2 to 3 copies of this, 1 copy of this, no one's really going over the limit and playing multiple of this, 1 of this, 3 of this, and 1 Tensu. So those are your basic ratios. In terms of decks that take really good advantage of this, things like Fire King, because things like Tenki can search their main deck monsters, or Bujins from time to time will play a Fire Fist engine because, it just gives you more options. Say you already have your Yamato and you don't need anything, but you have your extra Tenkis that would usually search your Yamatos. You now have the option to search potential monster removal and just in general, it gives you more options. So again, the decks that want to go +1 usually. Things like Koiki Miru is another good example, because if you don't see your whole combos with your Koiki Miru cards, if you see a bear and you're able to do some damage, you can get to Tenki, and Tenki can search your other half of your engine. Or again, it's just a supplementary engine that helps make rank 4s. So most commonly when you use your Wolf Bark, a lot of times people will go and make something like a Tiger King, which can set these directly from deck, which is really nice. Personally, I'm not the biggest fan of this engine, but there are definitely decks like the ones that I just mentioned that take really good advantage of it, and in those specific decks I do enjoy it a lot, but in general it is in the format and it is something you should be aware of. The last splashable engine I want to talk about in this video is one that I think is a little underrepresented, and I personally think is really cool and has a lot more potential than people make it out to be, and that is the ghostrick engine, which actually does have tops in several different types of decks in the past year for H.A.T format tournaments. The most commonly played ghostricks for the engine are going to be ghostrick Jiangshi, ghostrick Mary, ghostrick Spectre, ghostrick Lantern, and ghostrick Jack Frost. These are really cool cards. They all have the main ghostrick effect, which is you can't normal summon them unless you control a face-up ghostrick monster, and then once per turn you're able to flip them to face-down defense position. Besides that, they each have a unique effect based on what the conditions are that are met. So for example, Jiangshi has the effect that when it's flipped face up, you're able to add a ghostrick monster whose level is equal to or less than the number of face-up ghostrick monsters you control. So if it's the only set card and it gets flipped face up, you'll be able to add a level 1, and so on and so forth. Ghostrick Mary has the effect when you take damage, you can discard it and special summon a ghostrick monster from your deck in face-down defense position, and that's a hard once per turn. You have Ghostrick Spectre, that when a ghostrick monster is destroyed by opponent's card effect, or by their attacking monster and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon it in face-down defense position and draw a card that is not a hard once per turn. So if you have multiple, you can use multiple in the same turn. Ghostrick Lantern, that when your opponent's monster declares a direct attack or targets a ghostrick monster for an attack, you can negate the attack, special summon it in face-down defense position. And then Jack Frost says when your opponent's monster declares a direct attack, you book a moon the opponent's attacking monster and special summon it in face-down defense position. So in terms of what the common ratios played are, there's no set thing, but usually people will play 3 Jiangshi, 3 Mary. These 3 are the more situational, it's up to the player, but usually people are playing 3 and 3 of these. Now, these are really good ways to stall out games. For example, if your deck needs lots of turns to get to its main combo, this is a great way to deal with that. Or if you're playing a deck that's more back row based and you might need to be able to have pseudo battle fader type cards, then this is a very good engine. The other thing to note with this is a lot of the times people will also use this as an engine that can be used for tribute summons. Since they basically, other than Jiangshi, can free special summon themselves, you will then have tribute fodder most of the time for tribute summon cards. Also, it's just a way to always keep a monster on board, which is very nice. The levels are kind of strange because these are level 1s and this is level 3, so it doesn't have that much synergy in the average deck. But what's also nice about this is they're all darks, so you can have a lot of different decks that will use it to have Chaos Engine, so that is pretty unique too and very cool. And just in general, they're very powerful cards. I've seen these splashed in everything from Spirits to Madolche to Geargia and just a handful of other decks. I think it's extremely underrated and definitely something worth looking into. Anyways, guys, hopefully you enjoyed this video and it could give you a little more insight and give you ideas into some of the common splashable engines that you'll be seeing on your journey throughout H.A.T format. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like on the video, subscribe subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to get notified anytime I put a new video out. Comment any questions or things that you want to see in the future. For example, different video ideas or more discussion videos or anything like that. I'm always trying to respond to as many comments as possible. If you don't believe me, drop a comment and see if I respond. And anyways, guys, I will see you in the next video.